She was 8 months pregnant when she ran straight into the parking lot of a roadside diner and collapsed against the nearest motorcycle, begging the man standing beside it to save her life. Her hands were shaking, her face streaked with tears, her breath coming in desperate gasps that made her whole body tremble. "Please," she choked out, gripping the leather seat of the bike like it was the only solid thing left in the world. "He's going to kill me. He's been following me for months. I can't run anymore. I can't." The man turned slowly. Tall, broad-shouldered, maybe mid-40s, with a beard streaked with gray and eyes that had seen too much of the world to be surprised by anything. He wore a leather vest, worn and weathered, with a patch across the back that read Hell's Angels in bold letters. His name was Marcus, and he wasn't alone. For other bikers stood near their machines, mid-conversation, coffee cups in hand, and every single one of them had stopped talking to look at her. Behind her, at the edge of the parking lot, a silver truck sat idling, engine rumbling low, windows tinted so dark you couldn't see inside, but you could feel someone watching. The air felt heavy, dangerous, like the moment before a storm breaks. You need to understand something right now. This wasn't a random cry for help. This wasn't some dramatic overreaction or a misunderstanding that could be talked through. This was a woman 8 months pregnant, terrified out of her mind, running from a man who had been hunting her like prey for longer than anyone should have to endure. And if Marcus and his brothers hadn't been standing in that parking lot on that specific afternoon, this story would have ended in a way that no one should ever have to imagine. Let me take you back to the beginning. Her name was Sophie Grant, 28 years old, living in a modest one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood just outside Sacramento, California. She worked as a receptionist at a dental office, the kind of job where you smiled at patients, answered phones, scheduled appointments, and went home at the end of the day without much drama. She liked her routine. She liked her life. It was simple, predictable, safe. She had friends, a decent relationship with her family, and a habit of reading mystery novels before bed. Normal life. Normal routine. Until the day she met him. His name was Ian Cross, 35 years old, clean-cut, well-dressed, the kind of guy who looked like he had his life together. Charming in that smooth, practiced way that makes you feel special without quite knowing why. They met at a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning. Sophie was running late for work, fumbling with her wallet at the counter, and Ian stepped up behind her and offered to pay for her drink. "You look like you're having a rough morning," he'd said with a smile that seemed genuine. "Let me help." Sophie hesitated, but he insisted, and it felt rude to refuse. So she thanked him, grabbed her latte, and turned to leave. But he followed her outside, asked if she came to this coffee shop often, said he'd seen her there a few times before, and thought she seemed interesting. That should have been the first warning. The fact that he'd noticed her, watched her, remembered her before ever speaking to her. But Sophie told herself she was overthinking it. Told herself he was just being friendly. So when he asked for her number, she gave it to him. They texted for a few days. Casual conversation, nothing too forward. He asked about her job, her hobbies, and what she liked to do on weekends. He was attentive, asked follow-up questions, and remembered details. It felt nice to be paid attention to. They went on their first date the following Saturday. Dinner at a nice Italian restaurant downtown. Ian was a perfect gentleman. Pulled out her chair, asked about her day, listened when she talked. He told her he worked in tech, something vague about software development, made decent money, and lived alone. He didn't push for anything physical, didn't make her uncomfortable. When he dropped her off at her apartment, he walked her to the door and said he'd love to see her again. Sophie said yes. The second date was a movie. The third was a walk along the river. Everything seemed fine, normal even, until the fourth date. They were having dinner at a small bistro when Ian started asking questions that felt too personal, too specific. What time did she usually get off work? Did she always take the same route home? Did she live alone, or did she have a roommate? When Sophie hesitated, gave vague answers, Ian smiled and said he just wanted to make sure she was safe. that he worried about her driving home late, about her being alone in her apartment. "I just care about you," he'd said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "Is that so wrong?" Sophie pulled her hand back gently. "It's sweet, but we've only been on a few dates. It feels a little fast." Ian's smile didn't falter. "You're right. I'm sorry. I just feel like we have a real connection, you know? Like we're meant to know each other." That phrase, "meant to know each other," sat wrong in Sophie's stomach. But she told herself she was being paranoid, that he was just enthusiastic, maybe a little socially awkward. So she smiled, changed the subject, and tried to enjoy the rest of the evening. But when Ian dropped her off that night, he didn't just walk her to the door. He stood there, lingering, asking if he could come inside for a drink. Sophie said no, that she was tired, that she'd see him another time. Ian's smile tightened. "You sure? I feel like you've been distant tonight." "I'm just tired," Sophie repeated. "Okay," Ian said, stepping back. "I'll call you tomorrow." But something in his tone felt off, like he was upset but trying to hide it. Sophie went inside, locked the door, and felt relief wash over her. The next morning, she woke up to flowers on her doorstep. 24 red roses, no note. She texted Ian, asking if he'd sent them. He replied immediately, "Of course. Just wanted to make you smile." Sophie stared at the flowers, unease prickling at the back of her neck. She'd never given Ian her address. When she asked him how he knew where she lived, he responded with a winky face emoji. "Followed you home last night to make sure you got there safely. Hope that's okay." It wasn't okay. It was the opposite of okay. Sophie felt her chest tighten. She called her best friend, Nina, and told her everything. "That's creepy," Nina said bluntly. "You need to cut this guy off." So Sophie did. She texted Ian, told him she didn't think they were compatible, that she appreciated the dates but didn't want to see him anymore. Ian's response came an hour later. "That's disappointing. I thought we had something special. Can we at least talk about it?" Sophie didn't respond. The next day, a necklace arrived at her workplace. Silver, delicate, expensive looking. Her coworker handed it to her with a grin. "Someone's got a secret admirer." Sophie opened the box, saw the necklace, and felt her stomach drop. There was a note inside. "You deserve beautiful things. Please don't shut me out. We're meant to be together." She blocked Ian's number. That night, both of her car's front tires were slashed. She found them the next morning, flat and useless, the rubber cut clean through. There was a note tucked under her windshield wiper. "You can't run from what's meant to be." Sophie went to the police. She sat in a sterile room at the station, told an officer everything. Showed him the texts, the flowers, the necklace, the note. The officer, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, took it all down. "Has he threatened you directly?" the officer asked. "Not in words," Sophie said. "But he slashed my tires." "That's vandalism, right? That's illegal. Do you have proof he did it?" Sophie's heart sank. "No, but who else would it be?" The officer sighed. "Look, I understand this is scary, but without direct evidence, there's not much we can do. He hasn't made any explicit threats. He hasn't physically harmed you. The best I can suggest is that you document everything. Keep all the messages, take photos, and if he contacts you again, let us know." Sophie left the station feeling hollow. She changed her locks. She told her coworkers at the dental office not to accept any deliveries addressed to her. She blocked every number Ian tried to contact her from, and there were many. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Sophie started to relax, started to believe maybe he'd finally gotten the message and moved on. Then she found out she was pregnant. The father was her ex-boyfriend, a man named Daniel Reeves. They'd dated for 3 years, lived together for 1, and broken up 6 months earlier. It had been mutual, relatively amicable. They wanted different things. Daniel wanted to travel, to live freely without commitments. Sophie wanted stability, wanted to settle down eventually. So they parted ways. Stayed in touch occasionally, checked in every few weeks. When Sophie took the pregnancy test and saw the 2 lines, her first instinct was panic. Then she called Daniel. He came over that night. sat with her on the couch while she cried and told him everything. I don't know what to do, Sophie whispered. I wasn't planning for this. We weren't even together. Daniel took her hand. I know, but we'll figure it out. I'm not going to abandon you, Sophie. Whatever you decide, I'm here. Sophie felt a flood of relief. They talked for hours, decided they'd co-parent, that they'd make it work, even if they weren't together romantically. Daniel said he'd help with everything, that she wasn't alone. For the first time in weeks, Sophie felt like maybe things would be okay. But then Ian found out. Sophie didn't know how. She'd been so careful. But 3 days after she told Daniel, she woke up to messages from a new number. Congratulations on the pregnancy. That baby should be mine. We were meant to be together. You're making a terrible mistake. Sophie's blood ran cold. She showed Daniel the messages. His face went pale, then red with anger. How the hell does he know? Daniel demanded. I don't know, Sophie whispered. They went back to the police. This time, they spoke to a different officer, a woman named Sergeant Caroline Hayes. She was younger, sharper, and more willing to listen. She reviewed all the previous reports, looked at the new messages, and nodded slowly. This is stalking behavior, Hayes said. But I have to be honest with you. He hasn't made any direct threats of violence. He hasn't broken into your home. The messages are disturbing, but they're not enough for an arrest. What do we do? Sophie asked, her voice breaking. Hayes leaned forward. You can file for a restraining order. It's not a guarantee of safety, but it's a legal boundary. If he violates it, we can arrest him. So Sophie filed. It took a week for the order to be processed. During that time, Ian sent more messages. I know you're trying to keep me away. It won't work. We're connected. That baby is part of our destiny. Sophie stopped reading them. She forwarded everything to Hayes and tried to focus on work, on preparing for the baby, on anything other than the fear that sat like a stone in her chest. When the restraining order was finally granted, Hayes personally delivered it to Ian's apartment. She knocked on the door, and Ian answered with a smile. Can I help you? Ian Cross. Hayes asked. That's me. Hayes handed him the papers. This is a restraining order filed by Sophie Grant. You are to stay at least 500 feet away from her at all times. No contact, no messages, no showing up at her home or workplace. Do you understand? Ian's smile didn't waver. There must be some misunderstanding. Sophie and I have a relationship. This is just a rough patch. You don't have a relationship, Hayes said firmly. You've been stalking her. If you violate this order, you'll be arrested. Do you understand? Ian's eyes flickered, something cold and angry passing through them. I understand. Hayes left, and Ian kept his word for exactly 5 days. On the 6th day, Sophie was leaving the dental office after a long shift when she saw it. The silver truck, parked across the street, engine running, windows dark. She couldn't see inside, but she knew. She felt it in her bones, in the way her pulse spiked and her hands began to shake. She got in her car, locked the doors, and started driving. The truck followed. She took random turns, trying to lose it. Left on Maple, right on Birch, straight through a yellow light. The truck stayed 3 car lengths behind, never closer, never farther, like a shadow she couldn't shake. Sophie's breath came in short, gasping breaths. She pulled into a gas station, thinking maybe if she stopped somewhere public, somewhere with cameras, he'd leave. The truck pulled in behind her. She didn't get out. She sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, and called Daniel. He's following me, she said, her voice high and shaking. Right now? I'm at the Shell station on Maplewood. Stay there, Daniel said. I'm coming. Don't get out of the car. 10 minutes felt like an hour. Sophie watched the truck in her rearview mirror, waiting for the door to open, for Ian to step out. But he didn't. He just sat there, watching. When Daniel finally arrived, pulling up beside her car, the truck's engine roared to life. It backed out of the lot and disappeared down the street. Daniel jumped out, ran to Sophie's car. She unlocked the door, and he pulled her into his arms. It's okay, he said. He's gone. But Sophie was shaking so hard she couldn't speak. They went to the police station, filed another report, showed them the text messages, told them about the truck. Hayes listened, took notes, but her expression was grim. "He's being careful," Hayes said, "staying just far enough away that he's not technically violating the restraining order. Following someone isn't illegal if he's on public roads." "So what do we do?" Daniel demanded. "He's terrorizing her." "I know," Hayes said, "and I'm sorry. But unless he makes direct contact or threatens her, my hands are tied." Sophie felt something break inside her. The system that was supposed to protect her wasn't working. Ian knew it. He was playing a game, staying just inside the lines, and there was nothing anyone could do. That night, Sophie and Daniel sat in her apartment, curtains drawn, doors locked. "We need to leave," Daniel said quietly. "What?" "Leave Sacramento. Leave California if we have to. Start over somewhere he can't find us." Sophie stared at him. "You do that? You're carrying my child," Daniel said. "And you're my friend. I'm not letting this guy destroy your life." So they made a plan. They'd pack what they could fit in Daniel's car. They'd tell no one where they were going. They'd leave in the middle of the night and drive until they were far enough away that Ian couldn't follow. 3 days later, at 2 a.m., they loaded up the car and left. Sophie looked back at her apartment one last time, at the life she was leaving behind, and felt a mix of grief and relief. For 3 days, they drove north, through Oregon, into Washington. They stayed in cheap motels, paid cash, and used fake names. Sophie felt lighter than she had in months. No silver truck in the rearview mirror. No messages. No fear. But on the 4th day, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her heart stopped. She almost didn't open it. But she had to know. The message was short. "I know you left. I know you're running. But you can't hide from me, Sophie. We're meant to be together, and that baby is going to be ours." Sophie dropped the phone as it had burned her. Daniel picked it up, read the message, and his face went white. "How?" Sophie whispered. "How does he keep finding us?" Daniel thought for a moment, then his eyes widened. "The necklace." Sophie's stomach dropped. "What?" "The necklace he sent you months ago. Do you still have it?" Sophie's hands were shaking as she dug through her bag. She'd packed it without thinking, tucked in her small jewelry box out of habit. Daniel took it from her, examined it closely, then pried open the small pendant. Inside, barely visible, was a tracker, smaller than a dime, transmitting her location every single minute of every single day. Sophie felt like she was going to be sick. "He's been following us the whole time," Daniel said quietly. He walked outside, threw the necklace into a nearby river, and came back with a grim expression. "We drive harder. We change direction constantly. We lose him." So they did. For 2 weeks, they zigzagged across the Pacific Northwest. No pattern, no destination, just distance. And for 2 weeks, there were no messages. No signs. Sophie started to believe maybe, finally, they'd lost him. But you don't lose men like Ian Cross. Not when they've decided you belong to them. Sophie was 8 months pregnant when Daniel pulled off Highway 101 into a small town called Brookdale. It was late afternoon, and they both needed a break. Daniel needed coffee. Sophie needed to stretch her legs, to walk off the ache in her lower back that had been building for hours. The diner was called Betty's, a classic roadside spot with faded paint and a neon sign that flickered. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a row of motorcycles lined up near the entrance. 5 of them, chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun, leather saddlebags hanging off the sides. Hell's Angels. Sophie recognized the patches on the bikes. She'd seen them before, heard the stories, the reputation. Part of her wanted to suggest they find somewhere else to stop. But Daniel was already pulling into a spot, already turning off the engine. "It's fine," he said, seeing her hesitation. "We'll be in and out." Sophie nodded, but unease prickled at the back of her neck. They got out of the car. Daniel headed toward the diner. Sophie followed, one hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. And then she saw him, Ian, standing at the far end of the parking lot beside the silver truck. just standing there, hands in his pockets, watching her with that same calm expression he always had. Like he had all the time in the world. Like this was inevitable. Sophie's heart slammed against her ribs so hard it hurt. She grabbed Daniel's arm. He's here. Daniel turned, followed her gaze, and his face went pale. Get back in the car, he said, his voice tight. But Ian was already moving, walking toward them with slow, deliberate steps. Daniel stepped in front of Sophie, hands up. Stay back, Daniel shouted. I'm calling the cops right now. Ian didn't stop. He just kept walking, that calm expression never changing. Sophie. Ian called, his voice soft, almost gentle. We need to talk. Just you and me. This has gone on long enough. She doesn't want to talk to you, Daniel said, louder now. You need to leave. Now. Ian smiled. Or what? You'll stop me. He was close now. Too close. Daniel lunged forward, trying to block him, trying to put himself between Ian and Sophie. Ian shoved him hard. Daniel stumbled, hit the gravel, and landed on his side. Sophie screamed. Ian's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. His grip was iron, fingers digging into her skin. You're coming with me, Ian said quietly, his voice steady, controlled. This ends now. No more running. No more games. Sophie tried to pull away, but she couldn't. Her pregnant body was slow, off balance. Panic flooded her system, making her dizzy. She looked toward the diner, toward the motorcycles, toward anyone who might help. And that's when she saw him. Marcus. Tall, mid-40s, beard streaked with gray, wearing a leather vest with the Hells Angels patch across the back. He was standing near his bike, holding a cup of coffee, talking to another rider. But his eyes had shifted to the commotion. Sophie didn't think. She just acted. She wrenched her arm free from Ian's grip with a strength she didn't know she had and ran. Ran as fast as her 8 months pregnant body would let her, stumbling across the gravel lot, her breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. Ian started after her, his footsteps crunching on the gravel behind her. But Sophie reached Marcus first. She grabbed his arm, her knees nearly buckling, and looked up at him with wild, terrified eyes. Please, she gasped, her voice breaking. Please help me. He's going to hurt me. He's been stalking me for months. I'm pregnant. Please. I don't know what else to do. Marcus looked at her face. Red, streaked with tears, eyes wide with genuine terror. Then he looked past her. Ian had stopped a few feet away, hands now in his pockets, that same calm expression on his face. Daniel was getting to his feet in the background, blood on his lip from where he'd hit the ground. The other bikers had turned now. For men, all standing near their motorcycles, all watching. Marcus set down his coffee slowly. His voice was low, steady, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to carry authority. What's going on here? Ian's smile was easy, practiced. Misunderstanding. That's my girlfriend. She's upset, emotional. You know how pregnancy hormones can be. I'm just trying to take her home so we can talk this out. Liar. Sophie sobbed, still gripping Marcus's arm. I don't know you. I never wanted anything to do with you. He's been stalking me. Marcus looked at Ian. She says she doesn't know you. Ian's smile didn't waver. She's confused. Scared. The pregnancy is making her irrational. I just want to talk to her, make sure she's okay. Daniel stumbled over, breathing hard, wiping blood from his mouth. He's been stalking her for 8 months. We have police reports, restraining orders. He followed us across 3 states. He won't leave her alone. Marcus studied Ian for a long moment. Then he looked at his brothers. The other bikers moved without a word, casual but deliberate, forming a loose circle around Sophie, between her and Ian. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that made the air feel heavier. You're going to get in your truck and leave. Right now. Ian's smile tightened. I'm not leaving without her. We need to talk. No, Marcus said. You don't. She doesn't want to talk to you. So you're leaving. Ian glanced at the other bikers. For men, all standing firm, all watching him with expressions that said they weren't going anywhere. Ian's jaw clenched. You can't do this. You're threatening me. I'll call the police. Go ahead, Marcus said. Tell them you were harassing a pregnant woman. And a group of concerned citizens stepped in. For the first time, Ian's confidence cracked. His calm mask slipped, and Sophie saw what was underneath. Rage. Control slipping away. His hands curled into fists. This isn't over, Ian said quietly, his voice cold. Not even close. He looked at Sophie one last time, and the intensity in his eyes made her blood run cold. Then he turned and walked back to his truck. Slow. Deliberate. Never taking his eyes off her until he climbed inside. The engine roared to life. The silver truck pulled out of the lot, tires crunching on gravel, and disappeared down the highway. Sophie's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the gravel, her whole body shaking so violently she thought she might pass out. Marcus crouched beside her, his voice gentle now. You're safe. He's gone. Sophie looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. He'll come back. He always comes back. He always finds me. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we'll make sure he doesn't get close. Inside the diner, Sophie sat in a worn booth near the back, a cup of water in her trembling hands. Daniel sat beside her, holding her other hand tight, his knuckles white. Marcus sat across from them, the other bikers nearby. One of them, a younger guy with a shaved head and a scar across his eyebrow, stood near the door, watching the parking lot. Marcus leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Tell me everything. From the beginning. So Sophie did. She told him about the coffee shop, about Ian's charm that turned into obsession, about the dates, the gifts, the messages that wouldn't stop, about how he'd somehow known where she lived, where she worked, even when she changed her number, about the slashed tires, the break-ins, the tracker hidden in the necklace, about the police who couldn't do enough because Ian was always so careful, always just inside the legal lines, about the months of running, the cheap motels, the fake names, the constant fear. When she finished, her voice was hoarse. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his expression dark. Then he pulled out his phone. What's his full name? Ian Cross, Daniel said. Marcus typed, scrolled, his jaw tightening. He's got priors. Harassment charges in Oregon and Northern California. Both dropped because the victims stopped cooperating. Sophie felt bile rise in her throat. He's done this before. And he got away with it, Marcus said quietly. He looked at his brothers, and something passed between them. An understanding. One of the other bikers, a man named Cole with gray streaks in his long hair and tattooed arms, leaned forward. What's the play, Marcus? Marcus thought for a moment, his eyes hard. We follow him. Figure out where he's staying, what he's planning. Then we make sure the cops can't ignore him anymore. Daniel looked between them, disbelief and hope warring on his face. You do that? For us? You don't even know us. Marcus looked at Sophie, at her swollen belly, at the exhaustion and fear etched into every line of her face. No one messes with a pregnant woman, he said simply. Not on my watch. Another biker, a stocky man with a thick beard named Ray, spoke up. We got rooms at the motel down the road. You two should stay there tonight. We'll keep an eye out. Sophie's eyes filled with tears again. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank us yet, Marcus said. Let's make sure this guy can't hurt you first. For the next 2 days, Sophie and Daniel stayed in a small motel on the outskirts of Brookdale. It was cheap, the kind of place with peeling wallpaper and a flickering TV, but Sophie didn't care. For the first time in months, she felt something close to safe. Marcus and his brothers kept watch in shifts. Motorcycles parked outside, engines rumbling periodically as they checked the perimeter. Sophie finally slept. Not deeply, but more than she had in weeks. On the third day, Marcus came to their room with news. He knocked, and Daniel opened the door. We found him, Marcus said. Sophie's stomach dropped. Where? Motel about 20 miles south of here. A place called the Desert Inn. He checked in 2 days ago under a fake name, but it's him. Cole followed him there yesterday. Daniel's face paled. What's he doing? Marcus's expression was grim. Watching. Waiting. We think he knows you're here, or at least that you're nearby. He's been driving past this motel 3 times a day. Sophie felt her chest tighten. So what do we do? Marcus pulled out a folder, set it on the small table. Inside were printed photos. Timestamps. Locations. We build a case the cops can't ignore, Marcus said. Photos, evidence, a timeline. Then we hand it to them on a silver platter. Cole had been following Ian since they found him. Took photos every time Ian left his motel. Pictures of Ian driving slowly past Sophie's motel, parking across the street, walking up to the building, before Cole scared him off. He's escalating, Marcus said, flipping through the photos. And that's actually good for us. The more he does, the more evidence we have. Sophie stared at the photos. At Ian's face, calm and focused in every shot. What if he does something before the cops can act? What if he comes after me again? Marcus looked at her steadily. Then we stop him. That night, everything changed. It was past midnight when Cole, on watch outside the motel, saw headlights approaching. No engine noise, just the glow cutting through the darkness. The silver truck. Cole immediately pulled out his phone, called Marcus. He's here. Marcus was there in 3 minutes, along with Ray and another rider named Tommy. They parked their bikes out of sight and watched. Ian stepped out of the truck. He stood there for a moment, looking at the motel, at the row of dark windows. Then he started walking, straight towards Sophie's room. Cole stepped out from the shadows, blocking his path. Wrong room, buddy. Ian stopped. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Ian reached into his jacket and pulled out a knife. The blade glinted in the dim light from the motel sign. Cole didn't flinch. That's a bad idea. Headlights flooded the parking lot. Marcus and the others roared in on their bikes, engines screaming, surrounding Ian. Ian looked around, knife still in hand, and for the first time, real fear crossed his face. He was surrounded, outnumbered. Put it down, Marcus said, his voice like iron. Ian's hand tightened on the knife. His eyes darted between the bikers, calculating, desperate. She's mine, Ian said, his voice shaking now. You don't understand. We're meant to be together. No, Marcus said, stepping closer. She's not yours. She never was. And you're done. The other bikers closed in, a wall of leather and muscle. Ian's eyes went wild. You're threatening me. I'll tell the police you attacked me. Cops are already on their way, Marcus said calmly. You just threatened someone with a deadly weapon. In front of 5 witnesses. You're done, Ian. Ian looked at Marcus, then at the knife in his hand. And slowly, his hand opened. The knife clattered to the pavement. Marcus kicked it away, out of reach. Ray picked it up, held it carefully by the handle. Ian's face twisted with rage and desperation. You don't know who you're messing with. I'll ruin you. I'll ruin all of you. Marcus stepped even closer, his voice dropping low. And you don't know who you just tried to threaten. The woman in that room has been through hell because of you. You've stalked her, terrorized her, destroyed her life. But it ends tonight. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Ian heard them, and his face went white. 2 police cars pulled into the lot, lights flashing red and blue. Officers stepped out, hands on their belts. Sergeant Hayes was with them. She looked at the scene, at Ian surrounded by bikers, at the knife on the ground, and her expression hardened. Let him go, Hayes said. The bikers stepped back. Ian stumbled forward, trying to compose himself, trying to find his calm mask again. Detective, thank God, Ian started. These men attacked me. They threatened me. I was just Hayes held up a hand, cutting him off. Ian Cross, you're under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon, stalking, and violation of a restraining order. Ian's face drained of color. What? No, you don't understand. I haven't done anything. These men, Ian, shut up, Hayes said coldly. She nodded to the officers. They moved in, pulling Ian's arms behind his back, cuffing his wrists. You have the right to remain silent, Hayes began. You can't do this, Ian shouted. his voice rising to a panic. "This is illegal. I'll sue every single one of you. I haven't done anything wrong." Hayes stepped closer, her voice low and cold. "You've been stalking a pregnant woman for 8 months. You sent threatening messages. You violated a restraining order. You trespassed. You created fake identities to track her. And tonight, you pulled a knife on someone. So yes, Mr. Cross, I absolutely can do this." She turned to the officers. "Get him out of here." They dragged Ian toward the patrol car. He was still shouting, still trying to twist the narrative, but no one was listening anymore. As they shoved him into the back seat, Ian's eyes found Sophie standing in the doorway of her motel room, Daniel beside her. Ian stared at her, and even through the window, even in handcuffs, his expression was chilling. "Come again," like he knew something they didn't. Then the car door slammed shut, and he was gone. Hayes walked over to Sophie and Daniel. "Are you both okay?" Sophie nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Hayes glanced at Marcus. "You and your crew did good work. We couldn't have built this case without the evidence you gathered." Marcus just nodded. "We did what needed to be done." Hayes handed Sophie a card. "I'll be in touch. He's going to be held without bail this time. The evidence is overwhelming. You're safe now." 2 months later, Sophie gave birth to a healthy baby girl in a small hospital in Montana. She weighed 7 pounds, 3 ounces, had a full head of dark hair, and cried with strong, healthy lungs. Sophie held her daughter for the first time and wept. Not from fear this time, but from relief. From joy. From the overwhelming realization that she was finally, truly safe. She named her Grace. Grace Marie Grant. Daniel was there, holding Sophie's hand, tears in his own eyes as he looked at his daughter. "She's perfect," he whispered. Ian Cross was sentenced 4 months later to 9 years in prison. Sophie testified at the trial, her voice steady, her daughter in her arms. So did Daniel. So did Marcus and the other bikers. And so did a woman named Rachel Simmons from Oregon, who'd finally found the courage to come forward after reading about Sophie's case online. Rachel told her own story of being stalked by Ian, of the messages, the fear, the way he'd made her feel crazy. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, Sophie sat in the courtroom and exhaled for what felt like the first time in a year. Justice sometimes does come. It just takes people willing to fight for it. 6 months after Grace was born, Sophie and Daniel drove back to Brookdale. The Nevada desert looked the same as it always did. Endless, golden, unforgiving under the afternoon sun. But Sophie wasn't the same person who'd stumbled into that parking lot, terrified and alone. They pulled into the gravel lot outside the diner. The motorcycles were there, lined up like soldiers. And standing near the open garage door beside the diner, wiping grease from his hands, was Marcus. He looked up when he heard the car, and a slight smile crossed his face. "Didn't think we'd see you again," Marcus said as Sophie stepped out, Grace in her arms. "I had to come back," Sophie said. "I owed you more than just a thank you." Marcus walked over, looked down at the baby. "She's beautiful. What's her name?" "Grace," Sophie said. "Grace Marie. And her middle name is almost Marcus, but I figured you might not appreciate a girl named Marcus." Marcus laughed, a rare sound. "Grace is perfect." Inside the diner, Maya was working behind the counter. Cole, Ray, and Tommy were sitting in a booth, drinking coffee. When they saw Sophie, everything stopped. Maya came around the counter, pulled Sophie into a careful hug, mindful of the baby. "Look at you," Maya said, pulling back to study her face. "You look good. Really good." "I feel better," Sophie said. Most days are enough," Maya said softly. They sat together in the diner, Sophie telling them about Montana, about Grace, about therapy, and how hard it was at first, but how it was helping. About how she still checked her phone sometimes, still looked over her shoulder in parking lots, but how it was getting quieter. "It takes time," Marcus said, "but you're doing the work. That's what matters." Sophie looked around at these people, these strangers who'd become her protectors, her proof that good people still existed in the world. I don't know how to repay you, Sophie said quietly. You gave me my life back. Marcus shook his head. No, you took it back. We just stood with you while you did. Before they left, Sophie pulled something from her bag. An envelope. Inside was a check and a letter. I can't pay you what you really deserve, Sophie said. But I wanted to give you something. Marcus didn't open it. We don't need payment. I know, Sophie said. But I need to give it. Please. Marcus took the envelope, nodded once. Thank you. As Sophie and Daniel drove away, Grace sleeping peacefully in the back seat, Sophie looked in the rearview mirror. Marcus and the others stood in the parking lot, watching them go. Not with sadness, with pride. Sophie turned back to the road ahead. The highway stretched out in front of her, wide and open and full of possibility. And for the first time in over a year, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Here's the thing about stories like this. They happen every day. Women like Sophie, men too, people who are followed, harassed, stalked, made to feel like they're losing their minds. Most of the time, they face it alone. But they don't have to. There are people like Marcus, like Cole, like Maya, Ray, and Tommy. People who see someone in trouble and refuse to look away. Sometimes they wear leather and ride motorcycles. Sometimes they're teachers, neighbors, co-workers, friends. Sometimes they're strangers who just happen to be in the right place at the right moment. But they all have one thing in common. They believe no one should have to fight alone. If this story touched you, don't leave quietly. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. What city, what country? Because these stories connect us across oceans and borders and languages. They remind us that we all believe the same thing. That justice matters. That protection matters. That standing up for someone who can't stand up for themselves, that matters most of all. You are not alone. None of us is. And together, we are stronger than any fear.